I never imagined the day would come when my own flesh and blood would turn his back on me. Jake, my only son, the boy I raised, supported, and gave everything to, stood before me with a cold expression, arms crossed, as he uttered words I never thought I'd hear. "You need to leave, Dad." I blinked. "What? You don't have a job anymore. You're not paying the bills. I can't carry your weight," he said, like I was some useless burden. My heart clenched. This was my house. I had bought it. I had built this life for him. But in his eyes, I was just another broke old man with nothing left to offer. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Jake's son, Just go, Dad." His voice was sharp, impatient. "I don't have time for this." That was when it hit me. This wasn't my home anymore. Not in his eyes. And if that was how he felt, then I wouldn't beg. With a slow nod, I turned away, grabbing only my coat and wallet. I walked past him, past the photos on the wall, the ones of me holding him as a baby, of birthdays, holidays, all the moments that had apparently meant nothing to him. I stepped outside. The door slammed shut behind me. My son had just thrown me out of my own house. And he had no idea what he had just done. The cold evening air bit at my skin as I stepped off the porch, but my mind was oddly clear. Jake had thrown me out like I was some worthless old man. He thought I had nothing. He thought I was helpless. He had no idea I was richer than he could ever imagine. I pulled out my phone and made a call. A familiar voice answered almost immediately. "Mr. Carter, are you ready to check in?" I smiled. "Yes, Charles. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Sliding into my car. Yes, my car, which Jake must have assumed I left behind out of desperation. I drove through the city, passing busy streets and neon-lit signs. But I wasn't heading to a shelter. I was heading to a luxury penthouse suite at one of the most exclusive hotels in the city. The moment I walked through the golden entrance doors, the staff greeted me with warm smiles and bows. The manager himself, Charles, rushed over. "Welcome back, Mr. Carter." He took my coat, gesturing toward the elevator. "Your usual suite is ready." I stepped inside, and as the doors closed, I couldn't help but chuckle. Jake thought I had nowhere to go. He didn't know about the real estate empire I had built over the years. He didn't know about the private investments, the multiple businesses under my name, or the millions sitting in my accounts. Because I never flaunted my wealth. I lived simply, modestly. I never wanted Jake to grow up entitled. But maybe that had been my mistake. Maybe he thought I was nothing because I had never shown him how much I was really worth. As I stepped into my massive suite, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city, I made a decision. I wasn't going to tell Jake the truth. Not yet. Let him struggle. Let him think I was gone, broke, desperate. Let him learn what it means to stand on his own 2 feet. Because the moment he realizes the truth, it will be too late. Jake probably slept like a baby that night, thinking he had gotten rid of his useless father. But reality was about to slap him harder than he ever expected. I was enjoying my morning coffee in my penthouse suite when my phone buzzed. It was an automated email from the electricity provider for my old house. "Final warning. Your account is past due. Service will be disconnected in 48 hours. I smirked. Jake must have assumed that since the house was in his name, everything would keep running as usual. He had no idea I had been covering all the bills. I closed the email and took a slow sip of my coffee. Let him figure it out. I imagined how it played out that day. Jake, lounging on the couch, scrolling on his phone, enjoying his so-called freedom. Then the first bill arrived. Then another. And another. Mortgage. Utilities. Internet. Water. Credit card payments. All in my name. The realization must have hit him like a freight train. He wasn't free at all. He was drowning in responsibilities he never knew existed. I could almost hear him muttering, "Wait, Dad paid for all of this." Damn right I did. But the real kicker? The house. Jake assumed it was his just because I let him live there. But his name wasn't on the mortgage. Mine was. And I had already started the process of selling it. I imagined the look on his face when he checked the mail and saw the official notice of sale. Pure panic. His comfortable little world was about to collapse by the time my phone rang that evening. I was almost surprised he lasted the whole day without calling. I let it ring. Then it rang again. And again. By the 4th call, I finally picked up, keeping my voice calm, uninterested. "Hello, Dad." Jake's voice was shaky. "Listen, I think there's been a mistake. The electricity bill came in your name. And, there's a letter here about the house being sold. What's going on?" I smiled, swirling the drink in my hand. "Oh, that. Yeah, I'm selling the house, Jake. Silence. Then. What? No, you can't. I live here. I leaned back in my chair. No, I live there. But you kicked me out, remember? His voice was desperate now. Dad, come on. You wouldn't do that to me, right? I let the pause drag on before answering. Guess you'll have to figure it out on your own, just like I did. Then I hung up and let him stew in his own mess. Jake had spent his whole life thinking I would always be there to catch him. Now, he was finally realizing that safety net was gone. I didn't answer Jake's frantic calls the next day. Instead, I enjoyed a peaceful morning at my favorite high-end cafe, sipping a cappuccino and reading the financial news. Meanwhile, across town, Jake was dealing with his first real consequence. The power company had followed through with their warning. Lights off. Wi-Fi dead. The fridge? Silent. I imagined him pacing around, phone flashlight in hand, cursing at the blackout. Then it probably hit him. No money, no power. And he had no backup plan. By mid-afternoon, I finally checked my voicemail. Voicemail 1. Dad, I don't know what's happening, but the electricity's off. Can you send me some money? Just for this month. Voicemail 2. Dad, I tried to pay online, but I don't have access to the account. Can you fix this? Voicemail 3. Dad, seriously, call me back. I went to the bank, and they said my name isn't even on the house mortgage. What the hell? I smirked. The bank had finally told him the truth. The house wasn't his. It was mine, and it was already being sold. I ignored his messages until nightfall. Then, just as I was settling in for a steak dinner at a private members-only club, my phone lit up with a video call request. I answered. Jake's face appeared, and for the first time in years, I saw fear in his eyes. Dad, he exhaled. Listen, Hold on, I interrupted, cutting into my steak. Let me put you on speaker. I'm at dinner. Jake's eyes widened. He looked shocked. It finally dawned on him. I wasn't suffering. I wasn't homeless. I wasn't struggling. I was living better than ever. Dad, he stammered. You're out at dinner? Of course, I said, chewing slowly. Why wouldn't I be? His lip twitched. He was losing control of the conversation. I messed up, okay? I shouldn't have kicked you out. But you can't sell the house. I have nowhere to go. I took a sip of wine. Sounds like you have a problem then. His jaw clenched. Dad, please. I put my glass down and looked him straight in the eye. You wanted me gone, Jake. His breathing grew uneven. I didn't think. No, you didn't, I said, voice calm but firm. You assumed I was broke, that I needed you. But the truth is, Jake, I never needed you. You needed me. Tears pricked his eyes. Dad, I'm sorry. I tilted my head. Are you sorry for what you did? Or just sorry because you lost everything? Silence. He didn't answer. And that told me everything I needed to know. Jake always thought I was weak. That I'd always be there to clean up his mess. But now, as he sat there, his voice shaky, his hands trembling, I saw something new in his eyes. Fear. Regret. And for the first time ever, humility. Dad, please, he whispered. I don't have anywhere to go. I don't have any money. I let the words hang in the air. He was waiting for me to break. To cave in. To sigh and say, all right, Jake. Come home. But there was no home. I had already finalized the sale of the house. The paperwork was signed, and in 3 days, Jake would be out on the street. And he knew it. You know, I said, swirling my wine glass, I used to believe you'd grow up someday. That you'd take responsibility. Be a man. Jake swallowed hard. I can change, Dad. I shook my head. No, Jake. You change when it benefits you. Not because you actually care. I do care, he insisted. Then why didn't you care when I lost my job? Silence. His lips parted, but he had no real answer. I leaned forward. You didn't kick me out because I was useless. You kicked me out because you saw me as an inconvenience. I saw his breathing grow shallow. The reality of his actions was sinking in. And I wasn't going to save him. I let out a slow sigh. The house is already sold, Jake. His face drained of color. What? He stammered. I nodded. It's done. The new owners move in next week. You have 3 days to pack up and leave. Tears welled in his eyes. Dad, please. I raised a hand, cutting him off. I gave you everything. I paid for your education, your home, your bills. I sacrificed for you. And the one time I needed you? You threw me out like garbage. He blinked rapidly, trying to think of something, anything, to change my mind. But it was too late. You made your choice, I said. Now you live with it. I ended the call. And for the first time in years, I felt free. A year passed. I flourished. My investments grew. I traveled, I lived, and I enjoyed life on my terms. And Jake? I never heard from him again. Last I checked, he was working a minimum wage job, barely making ends meet. He had to learn the hard way what responsibility actually meant. And I had no regrets. Because sometimes, the best way to teach someone a lesson is to let them lose everything. Jake always thought he could get away with anything. He believed life would always hand him an easy way out. But as the days passed and his eviction date loomed closer, reality finally caught up to him. Jake had 3 days before he was officially homeless. At first, he was cocky, convinced he could talk his way out of it. He called friends, expecting them to offer him a couch to crash on. Sorry, man, my place is full. Dude, I can't take in another person. Rent's killing me. Damn, that's rough. Hope you figure it out. One by one, they all turned him down. Jake had burned too many bridges. No one was willing to save him. Desperate, he started selling his belongings. His gaming setup? Pawned for pennies. His designer sneakers? Gone. His TV? Sold for grocery money. With every sale, he felt his life slipping further from his control. He never thought he'd end up this low. He was finally starting to feel what I had felt when he threw me out. On the last night before his eviction, I got a text. Jake, Dad, I'm sorry. Can we talk? I didn't reply. An hour later, my phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call. And another. Finally, I answered. Jake's voice was shaking. Dad, please, I have nowhere to go. I sighed. And? He choked back a sob. I don't know what to do. For the first time, he sounded like a scared little boy. Not the arrogant man who once kicked me out. Not the son who thought I was worthless. Just a man who had finally learned what it meant to lose. I let the silence stretch before I spoke. You still have one option. Jake's breath hitched. What? Anything. I'll do anything. I leaned back. Come to my office tomorrow morning. He sounded confused. Your office? That's right. He had no idea. No idea that I had built something new. That I had risen from nothing and turned my secret fortune into something even greater. And tomorrow, he would see exactly what I had become. Jake showed up at the office the next morning. But he wasn't prepared for what he saw. He expected some small job offer, maybe a favor, maybe a little sympathy. Instead, he walked into a glass skyscraper, my skyscraper. I think I'm in the wrong place, Jake muttered to the receptionist. She gave him a polite smile. No, Mr. Walker is expecting you. Take the elevator to the top floor. Jake blinked. Top floor? That's when he saw my name on the wall. Walker Enterprises. He froze. I owned the company. The realization hit him like a freight train. When the elevator doors opened, he walked into a massive corner office. And there I was, sitting at a sleek black desk, dressed in a tailored suit, sipping coffee like I had all the time in the world. Jake's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. Surprised, I asked, setting my cup down. He stared at me. How? I leaned back in my chair. How did I go from the useless old man you threw out to this? He swallowed hard. I smirked. I had a plan, Jake. While you were busy living off my money, I was investing. I was building. I was preparing for the day you'd show up, just like this. His hands balled into fists. So what now? I slid a folder across the desk. Jake hesitated before opening it. Inside was a contract. A janitor position? His voice cracked. I folded my hands. That's right. Full-time. Minimum wage. No special treatment. His nostrils flared. You're joking. I met his glare with a cold stare. No, Jake. The joke was when you threw me out. The joke was when you thought you were too good for hard work. Silence. This is my final offer, I continued. If you want a job, prove you're willing to start from the bottom. Just like I did. His jaw clenched. His pride was screaming at him to refuse. But his empty bank account? His homeless future? That made the decision for him. I'll take it, he muttered. Jake walked out of my office that day, his head down. For the first time, he was going to learn the value of real work. And as I watched him leave, I knew. This was only the beginning of his real education. Jake used to live like a king. But today, he was just a janitor. His expensive lifestyle was gone. His fancy clothes? Replaced by a gray uniform with my company's logo on it. For the first time, he was invisible. No one greeted him with respect. No one cared that he was once the big man in his world. He was just another worker. And it was eating him alive. Jake's first task? Cleaning the executive bathrooms. As he scrubbed the sinks, a group of young businessmen walked in. They were laughing, discussing a multi-million-dollar merger. Jake kept his head down, hoping they wouldn't notice him. Then one of them did. "Hey," the guy said, frowning. "Aren't you Jake Walker?" Jake flinched. This was one of his old college friends. A guy he used to party with. A guy he used to look down on. The man smirked. "Didn't your dad used to be, unemployed?" Jake forced a smile. "Yeah, he figured things out." The guy laughed. "Yeah, no kidding. He's your boss now." The group burst out laughing as they left. Jake gripped the sink so hard his knuckles turned white. He hated this. But there was no way out. During lunch, Jake sat alone in the cafeteria, eating a basic sandwich. No steak dinners. No fancy cocktails. Just dry bread and regret. That's when the real humiliation began. A group of younger employees sat near him, whispering and glancing his way. He heard snatches of their conversation. "That's the boss's son? Man, he must have screwed up bad. Imagine getting hired as a janitor in your dad's company." Jake's face burned. He used to be the one whispering. He used to be the one looking down on others. Now, he was at the bottom. And he finally understood what that felt like. At the end of the day, Jake dragged himself into my office. His eyes were red-rimmed, his shoulders slumped. "Dad," his voice was hollow. "I get it." I raised an eyebrow. "Get what?" His throat bobbed. "I get what it feels like to be thrown away. To be treated like you don't matter." For the first time, I saw something real in his eyes. Regret. Understanding. Maybe even growth. I stood up and walked to the window. "Good. That means you're finally learning." He let out a shaky breath. "How long do I have to do this?" I smirked. "That depends. How long did it take me to rebuild my life after you kicked me out?" Jake's face went pale. He had a long road ahead. And for the first time in his life, he couldn't take the easy way out. Jake had lost everything. But now he had a chance to rebuild. The question was, would he take it? And more importantly, had he finally changed? The end.